Hi, I'm Grady Cullen in the CapeCod.com News Center, and welcome to Sunday Journal. I'm joined today by a special guest from AAA. Do you mind introducing yourself for our listeners?
Sure. My name is Donald Kerr, and I'm the Director of Student Lending and College Services for AAA Northeast.
All right, awesome, Donald. Thank you so much for finding the time out of your busy schedule to have this conversation with me. I had a lot of questions related to financial aid and people trying to essentially afford higher education, especially in a post COVID world. But first things first, do you mind just talking a little bit more about yourself, your experiences, kind of like what the services you provide, the expertise you've lent to families over the years?
Sure, of course. So I have about 25 years of experience in the education finance industry. I've worked for colleges in the financial aid office. I've worked for the big banks who make student loans. And I've worked for the companies that manage the student loan debt on behalf of the government. But most importantly, for the last 10 years, I've been here with AAA working one on one helping families navigate the financial aid process, teaching them how to apply, maximize the amount of aid they can qualify for. How are they going to fund that education once they've got financial aid? And then, unfortunately, a big part of my business is also how do they manage the student loan debt after they graduate?
Yeah, it's kind of a confusing process sometimes. I figured before we dive directly into it and tackle all these bigger questions, just wanted to say to the parents out there listening, take a nice deep breath. It's gonna be okay. We'll get through it. But first things first is what is FAFSA is kind of course the main focus here. But what are some of the frequently asked questions that you kind of come across when some families are trying to first get into this? Maybe it's their first child who's going to higher education in general. What are some of the major big topics that you like to cover when you're first starting with the advice?
Yeah, so a lot of people sometimes are afraid to fill out the FAFSA form because they think it's too complicated, or they're afraid they're not going to qualify for anything, so they avoid it. Everybody should fill out the FAFSA form, in my opinion. They have really streamlined this process. They've taken the form from well over 100 questions down to less than 40. And even for some people, could be as low as 28 questions. And everybody is going to get something, even a low interest rate loan from the federal government. So everybody should fill out the form, is my opinion, unless your plan to pay for college is to write a check. Well, then, okay, maybe you're fortunate enough you don't have to. Everybody else absolutely should.
Mhm. No, if only we could all be in that boat. Unfortunately, it's not
Yes.
quite fully realistic. But so as well, this there's a lot of opportunities. You kind of already mentioned various forms of loans and stuff like that. Do you have certain routes that you try to steer people more towards, or does it just depend on their living situation? Like, how do you determine kind of like which tools to try and like highlight to certain people?
Yeah, so it really does depend upon the individual family and what their goals are. There are a lot of different options out there for loans, and we try to tailor it to what the family wants. So some families their philosophy may be, well, this is the child's education, so we want all the loans to be in the child's name. It's their responsibility for paying it. Other families take the approach, they may say, well, you know what, I don't want my student drowning in loan debt when he gets out. I want my child to be successful. So the parents in that situation want to take on a lot of the debt. And there's that in between option where some families want to split the burden and say, let's share that. The student has half of it, and we, the parents, will take the other half. So I try to find out what their goals are and what they want to do, and then I'll steer them into the right solution.
hmm Have you noticed that this process has kind of maybe changed a bit since kind of like we're over the height of COVID-19? But are families now like a lot more focused on like really trying to squeeze out like as much as they can? Has the attitude changed since COVID?
Yeah, so college is definitely very expensive.
Mhm.
And during COVID, there were lots of different changes in people's attitudes towards college. Um, they understand the value of it still, but the price has gone up so much that they're really starting to pay attention to that price factor. Where is a family's cutoff for it? So it's something that's a lot more sensitive. The new FAFSA form allows families to list up to 20 schools to receive the results of the FAFSA. That's going to give a family a chance to really compare different financial aid offers from different schools, and they can weigh out, that cost a little more um, easier when they have that many schools to compare it to.
Hmm. Now, of course, all of this is on the classic deadlines. Do you have recommendations kind of like for when and how people start working on this sort of thing? Do they need to, if they're going to utilize services like yourself, do you have to like reach out by a certain time or deadline? How does that work out?
Yeah, so there are some deadlines. There are basically deadlines the federal government has, the state government has, and then every individual college could have their own deadline. So I always recommend look at the college's deadlines. Maybe you have 5 colleges, research them, and then whatever the earliest deadline is, make sure you fill out the FAFSA form by that date. As long as you have it done by then, you're gonna be in great shape.
Mhm. Yeah, I believe I checked ahead of time before because it's been a while since my own personal college experience. But the deadline for FAFSA is well beyond any of the deadlines for the individual colleges. So it's definitely much more reasonable to check out with your local college first, whatever you're planning to go to. As well, do you have people who are like trying to figure out follow-up questions with you, like even after they do the FAFSA project, excuse me, the application? Do you have people routinely coming back to ask more about how to handle loans or what they can do after they've begun the college process and they've finished FAFSA and they're just trying to manage those loans now?
Yeah, absolutely. So this year more than ever, that's a question I'm kind of getting very frequently. There's a bit of a gap from after you fill out the FAFSA form to the school's reply to you. And they're all different formats, the way the schools reply to you and give you a financial aid offer, and they come at different times. So one of the most frequent questions I get is, do I have to accept that aid offer that I've gotten from that college? Can I negotiate and ask for more aid? Under certain circumstances, you can. So, when you filled out the FAFSA form, maybe it was filled out with 2020 financial information. Maybe something unfortunate has happened, like a parent has lost a job. Well, if that's a situation, you can absolutely appeal your aid offer to the financial aid office, and they could give you more money and help you out. So there's a bit of that gap that I always want to make families aware of. There's something they can do to address those circumstances during that time.
Hmm. How much do you think, I mean, like in services, do you think that you guys provide? Do you think you're responsible for like hundreds or thousands of dollars in savings when it comes to the college application? If you could put a number to what kind of tips and tricks you've offered over the years?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm going to say, in the families can save thousands of dollars pretty easily. I had one family with just a simple negotiation tactic. Their school gave them another $5,000 a year. You take that over 4 years, that was a $20,000 savings for that one family. And what's important, and I always like to point out, say, all right, 5,000 doesn't sound like a home run, doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you don't have to borrow that in a loan, the actual savings with interest charges is a lot more. So instead of now saving 20,000 over 4 years, realistically you might have saved 30 or $40,000 by paying back a loan and avoiding those charges.
Mhm. Now you've been at this for a while. Do you mind talking about some of the changes that you've seen with FAFSA? I know recently there's been a little bit of a revamp as well. I'm not quite sure if that's referring to specifically the cut down to below 40 questions that you referred to earlier. But like is it easier for families now? What were some of the biggest changes and especially, excuse me, some of the more recent changes you've seen with this application process?
Yeah, so some of the biggest changes are they have kind of split the form up. So before it was one form, families would go in and complete it. Now they've split it up, and a student needs to go in first, fill out their section of the form, and they have to invite their parent to apply for the form. So they send them a formal email invitation, and the parent has to go in to their email, open that up, and then they can link right into their section of the FAFSA form. So theoretically, they don't even see the student's information. They're only seeing the parent's information. Um, the second really big change they've made on the FAFSA form this year is they've eliminated tax information going into the FAFSA form in the majority of cases. So used to in the olden days have to type in your tax data, and then they put in a nice tool which would allow you to download your tax data into the FAFSA form. Now you just simply sign an authorization form granting the IRS permission to share your tax data. You never even see it. So it's really, really simplified and streamlined. However, if a person maybe say owes the IRS money from a particular tax year, or maybe they're a victim of identity theft, they can't use that particular tool and they may still have to manually enter their tax data. So it's always a good idea to have your tax forms by your computer on backup just in case. But that one change alone should really save families a lot of time.
Yeah, that is awesome. Definitely, living in the digital age has its benefits. Are there any other kind of recommended resources and tools to have around, other homework that you recommend people do before they get ready to file the FAFSA, alongside tax forms? Do they need to have any kind of other paperwork with them?
So the biggest thing they need is going to be a username and password. And they can visit studentaid.gov to set that up. A password for both the parent and the student need their own accounts. And you need to do that about 3 to 5 days before you want to fill out the FAFSA form. They can also visit our website, AAA.com/financial aid. We have a pivotal college years portal, which is a great tool, which is free for all AAA members to use. And it covers tips and tricks on everything from writing your essay all the way up to managing student loan debt. How do you choose a college? How do you apply for financial aid? So it's a great resource for all members to use for free.
Hmm. Now, Donald, I know wasn't necessarily your lead expertise when we got you on the call, but because I still have nightmares about this, I simply have to know: do you have recommendations when it comes to writing that college essay that you want to relay to some students who might be listening now, trying to figure out exactly how they need to go about that process?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things is the honesty of the student using their things that are unique. You don't want to try to fit into that mold that you think the admission officer is looking for. You want to truly be yourself and use what's unique about you and include that in your essay. That sense of, you know, being genuine about who you are goes a long way during the admissions process. It really does. Um, and one of the biggest things in the digital age now is you have a college you really like, go out and visit their website 10 times a day. They're tracking how many times you're visiting their website using analytics to determine how serious you are to attend their school. So it's a great tip that goes along with that admission side that can help you get that acceptance letter.
Wow, good to know. Definitely wouldn't never whatever crossed my mind, but that's definitely interesting to note. As well. So just we're about coming up on time now, but just any kind of more final recommendations or comments they wanted to make to both the student themselves who is trying to get through this process, and then separately also the parents who are trying to facilitate for their child.
Yeah, to in any particular year, but in this year, you really need to be patient. The FAFSA form is new and has gone through a lot of changes. So there's going to be hiccups with anything. There's going to be some technical errors here and there. Be patient, stick with it, and then follow up with your college. Don't assume, okay, hey, I got the form submitted, everything's okay. After it's submitted, follow up with your college and double check and just make sure they receive those results. It's kind of a tricky year, but if you're patient and follow up, you're going to get through this process.
All right, awesome, Donald. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Just before we wrap up, one more time, do you mind giving us where people can find out more of those resources available online?
Sure, they can visit AAA.com/financial aid.
All right, awesome. Thank you again for joining me for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.